April is when most people buy their own plants. Walking into a garden center around this time of the year, early to mid-April in Vancouver, it feels exciting, everything looks fresh, full, color everywhere, and it's very easy to just walk in, pick what looks nice, load up the cart, and think, this is going to look great at home. I see it happen every spring, and honestly, I understand it. After months of gray weather, you just want to bring some life back into your space. You want color, you want something that feels like progress, but here is the reality. What looks good inside the greenhouse is not always what works outside in your garden, especially here in Vancouver. Places like Kitsilano, Point Grey, Kerrisdale, we're dealing with very specific conditions, heavy soil, a lot of moisture sitting in the ground, and even in April, the weather is still unpredictable. So if you choose plants just based on how they look, you can run into problems pretty quickly. They struggle, they sit there, or they don't establish the way you expect. Now, over the last couple of videos, we've already talked about the important work. We cleared the space, opened the soil, we protected it, we gave it a solid foundation, so now your garden is actually ready. And this is the moment where most people ask the same question, alright, what should I plant now? And instead of giving you a long list or throwing a bunch of options at you, I want to keep this simple. Today, I'm going to walk through a few types of plants that I consistently use this time of year in Vancouver. Things that can handle conditions well, things that establish properly, things that don't just look good for a week, but actually continue growing into summer. So you're not guessing, you're choosing with confidence. If your garden has no structure, it won't work long term. First thing I always think about is not flowers, it's structure. Because the garden shouldn't only look good right now, when everything is waking up in spring. It needs to hold its shape later on. When things slow down again, especially here in Vancouver, November, December, everything feels gray, wet, quiet. And if your garden doesn't have strong structure, it just disappears. So instead of starting with small plants, or seasonal plants, or color, I always begin with something reliable, something that gives the garden a backbone, shrubs that stay consistent, that don't fall apart when the season changes. One of my go-to plants in April is Camellia. You'll usually see two main types around here, Japonicas and Williamsii. Both are beautiful, but if your space is a bit more open, a bit more exposed to wind, I tend to lean towards Williamsii. They're more forgiving, they handle the conditions better, and they still give you those soft, elegant flowers in spring. But most importantly, they hold their form. The leaves stay strong, they give you presence in the garden, even when nothing else is happening. Another plant I often use this time of the year is Magnolia stellata. It's not overwhelming. It fits nicely into smaller gardens, which is perfect for a lot of homes in Kitsilano. And when it blooms, it has that quiet impact. It doesn't shout, but you notice it. Now here's something I've learned over the years. Placement matters more than the plant itself. With something like Magnolia, you want to be careful where you put it. If it catches early morning sun in spring, especially after a cold night, those buds can get damaged very quickly. The frost hits them, then the sun comes out, and that quick change can ruin the flowers before they even open. So instead of rushing to plant, take a moment, look at your space, watch how light moves through it, because when structure is placed well, everything else becomes easier to build around it. And that's what we're doing here. We're not just planting, we're setting the foundation for the whole garden. Empty space in your garden won't stay empty for long. Once your main structure is in place, now you can start looking at what's in between. And this is where a lot of gardens fall apart, because people focus on the big plants, but forget about the gaps. And in places like Vancouver, those gaps don't stay empty. Nature fills them for you, usually with weeds. So instead of reacting later, you fill that space intentionally, but the goal here is not to pack everything in, it's to choose plants that settle in naturally, that spread gently, and cover the ground over time, without constant work. One plant I've used again and again is hardy geranium. Not the ones you see in seasonal pots, but true garden varieties. Something like Rozanne works really well here. It's low effort, it moves across the soil without taking over, and it handles our conditions without complaining. Rain, heavy soil, a bit of neglect, it just keeps going. And what I like about it It doesn't try to stand out too much, it just connects everything. It softens the edges, it fills the gaps between larger plants, and makes the whole space feel more complete. Now some people like using other ground covers, and that's fine. There are plenty of options, but I tend to choose plants that blend, not compete. Because when everything is fighting for attention, the garden starts to feel busy, disconnected. So I keep it calm, let things flow together. Now if you're working with shade, which a lot of gardens here have, especially under trees or along fences, you need something different. That's where something like Pachysandra comes into play. Pachysandra has nice shiny green leaves and a nice white flower that comes out afterwards. They fill the space fairly quick, and it cuts out light for the weeds to fill in and try to take over. And more importantly, it's comfortable in those damp, shaded spots where a lot of other plants struggle. So instead of forcing something that needs sun, you work with the space you have. And when you do that, plants settle in much easier, they require less attention, and the garden starts to feel more balanced overall. Because you're not just filling space randomly, you're completing the picture. April is when you start growing food, not summer. Now this is the part most people look forward to, growing something you can actually eat. And the good thing is, you don't have to wait. Here in Vancouver, April is already a great time to begin. You don't need heat, you don't need perfect weather. In fact, a lot of edible plants prefer it a bit cooler. If you got raised beds, that's even better. They warm up a little faster, they drain more freely, and that makes it easier for young plants to settle in. But even if you're planting directly in the ground, as long as you've done the prep work, you're in a good place. Now at this time of the year, I keep it simple. I don't try to grow everything. I focus on what naturally grows right. Things like lettuce, kale, arugula, and peas, and some basic herbs. These are reliable, they don't ask for much, and they respond quickly. You plant them, give them a bit of care, and with a short time you start to see real progress. That's important, because early success builds confidence, and it keeps you going. If you want to expand a bit, you can start adding a few more crops. Early potatoes are a good option. Something like Charlotte does well here. It handles the conditions, and it's quite forgiving. Broad beans are another one I often recommend. You can plant them straight into the soil or start them in pots if you prefer more control early on. Either way works, especially if your soil is in good shape, and that really is the key. It's not about choosing complicated crops, it's about matching what you plant with the conditions you have right now. So instead of pushing for summer plants too early, you work with the season. You grow what wants to grow. And when you do that, everything becomes easier. Less stress, less guessing, and a much better chance of success. Because you're not forcing the garden, you're moving with it. A beautiful plant can still be the wrong plant. And here's something I notice every single spring. People choose plants with their eyes first. They see something full of color, something that stands out, and they bring it home. And in the moment, it feels like the right decision, but a few weeks later, it doesn't set, it struggles, or it just doesn't fit the space the way they expected. Because how a plant looks doesn't tell you how it thrives, and that's the difference. Another thing I always keep in mind is what the plant gives back, not just to you, but to the garden as a whole. Pollinators matter, bees, beneficial insects, they're part of what keeps everything balanced. So I tend to choose plants that are often simple, accessible, flowers where bees can actually land, move through, and do their job. Some of the more heavily bred varieties, which dense layered petals, they can look impressive, but they don't offer much support to that ecosystem. So again, it's not just about appearance, it's about function. And then there's the biggest factor of all, your space. Every garden here is a little different. Some get full sun all day and dry out quickly, especially in summertime. Others stay cool, shaded, and hold on to moisture. So instead of trying to make your decision something that's not, you work with what you have. If your space is bright and drains well, then plants like lavender, Mediterranean herbs, rosemary, those can work beautifully. But only if the soil allows it. They don't like sitting in wet ground. On the other hand, if your garden holds moisture or sits in shade for most of the day, don't fight that. Lean into ferns, sarcococa. Plants that can actually enjoy those conditions will always perform better. And you require less effort from you, because you're not constantly trying to fix something, You're letting the garden settle into what it naturally wants to be. And that's where things start to feel easier, more stable, more consistent over time, because you're not just choosing plants, you're choosing the right plants for your space. There's no perfect plant list, only what works for your space. So everything I shared today, this is just what I've seen work again and again here in Vancouver. Different gardens, different conditions, with the same principles. And after doing this for many years, you start to notice patterns, what settles in easily, what struggles, what actually lasts beyond a few weeks. But here's the thing, no two gardens are exactly the same. Even on the same street, even just a few houses apart, light changes, soil changes, wind changes. So what works in one space might not work in another, and that's completely normal. That's part of the progress, so instead of trying to get everything perfect, just start observing the space, start simple, and adjust as you go. And I'd really like to hear from you. So what are you thinking of planting this spring? Or maybe there's a spot in your garden that you're unsure about, too wet, too shady, too exposed, and you don't know what to put there. Just ask. Keep it simple. Can this grow here? Drop it in our comments and I'll go through them. And I'll pick the most common questions to cover in the next videos. So we're not just sharing ideas, we're building something practical together, garden by garden, step by step. I'm Darrell, and I'll see you outside.